Warning, listening to this show may result in increased levels of inspiration, motivation, and innovation. Side effects can include the immediate urge to take massive action to build a better business and life for yourself and others. You've been warned. Welcome to Influencers Radio with your host, Jack Mize.
And welcome back to another episode of Influencers Radio. Today, I got to say, this episode that we have today, if you are living and participating in the modern digital society, there is going to be something in this show for you. It's going to be information that you definitely need to understand, even if you are advanced or not so advanced around this topic. You really do need to understand the basics of how things work and the real threats that are out there. And I'm talking about data. I'm talking about internet. I'm talking about computer security. Young, old, if you have the ability to hear this episode, then what my guest has to say today will affect you, because my guest helps everyday non-technical people to secure their computers and protect their online privacy. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security for non-techies. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Carey Parker. Welcome to Influencers Radio, Carey.
Hey, thank you very much, Jack. Glad to be here.
Well, let me start with this. I think the fact, just the title of that book, and I'm going to go ahead and say right up front, anyone out there listening, definitely check out the book, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security for non-techies. And when you say non-techies, you mean it. I've seen a lot of books that are for non-techies, I won't mention any names specifically, but the for dummies and idiots, all right?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's still above a lot of people's heads, right? And I think everybody who works in a company that has an IT guy, they think they're talking in simple terms, but they aren't. But you have a way of really describing this stuff that's, one, simple to understand, but two, it's also not condescending in the way. And I think that is why I appreciate, your book so much, but also to hear you talk about this topic, because it's something that a lot of people avoid just because we don't want to sound dumb. You're right. So let's start there. Tell me, when we talk about this topic, who are we talking about that can benefit this, and what level of knowledge are they going to need to have around this?
Great question. So I've been the family IT guy for years. So I've been talking to, many people in my family, some old, some younger, that are smart people. It's not that they don't know what they're talking about, but computers, for whatever reason, are things that people, it's indistinguishable from magic, as Arthur C. Clarke would say, any advanced technology. And it's really for anybody that uses the internet. And there's a lot of people out there doing that. Obviously, it's kind of the core of modern digital society. And most people just don't understand the nuts and bolts of how it works. And it is extremely complicated. Don't get me wrong. That if massive volumes could be written and have been written on the topic, but just understanding the very basics is key. And and I'm kind of a political guy, a political junkie. So, putting my, U.S. citizen hat on or global citizen hat on, I think that, people need to understand the very basics, because they need to vote with their pocketbook and they need to vote at the ballot box. There are a lot of issues coming up today that people just need to have a basic understanding. And unfortunately, I think the media today has really just kind of overhyped a lot of this stuff and focused on the wrong things. And frankly, those people probably don't know about this stuff either. And, where would most people learn these things today? Who would have taught you these things? It's not something that's standard in schools. And most of us, of course, have long since gotten out of school. So where would you learn these things? And there's all sorts of really technical books on these things. And you've mentioned some of the dummies books, and some of those actually are good. But I looked around and I didn't see this topic was really, to my satisfaction, addressed. And I'm glad you feel that it was not condescending. That's exactly the tone I was looking for. I want to explain these things to people in a fun, kind of engaging way to keep them coming along, give some, interesting anecdotes along the way to kind of keep them interested. But, it's all about basically inoculating as many people as possible, vaccinate them with knowledge. Kind of like vaccinations, you're really protecting those around you as well as yourself, even if they're not vaccinated, because by virtue of you being vaccinated, you're less likely to be infected or have something bad happen that could spread to other people. So, my audience really is just about everybody. I'm a software engineer. I've been doing it for a long time. I've even had some of my software engineer buddies read the book and say, I learned something from that book, which, that's a big thing for me. So,
well, I could tell you, one of the things that, you mentioned something that I think is important with, all the information around this. And I think people are afraid to ask because they are afraid of sounding dumb. And I think a lot of people just have their head in the sands around technology and computers. But when you think about it, it is another appliance. All right. So, when you say people don't know how do they work. And I think that's where people feel that they should know more about how they work. But the fact is, I don't know how my dishwasher works, but I know, the basics of what to do. I don't know how my stove or my oven works, but I know not to stick my head in it. I know not to put my hand in the toaster. So but with computers, it seems like, I think maybe you're right when you say the media and there's so much overwhelm that it's like, well, gosh, it's not even worth. There's too much to know. Yeah. I'm not even going to begin to think about this. So I guess ignorance would be the word, and not in a not in a
pejorative sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm that way too. And keep my head in the sand and you see things pop up all the time on the computer. Oh, you're infected with this. So you better, it's almost like, back in the days of the old gangster protection, right?
Yeah.
That's what it seems to be. But we hear things on the media like, oh, the cloud, all your information's in the cloud. And I think if we actually asked the majority of people if they knew what the cloud was, I think, they'd like to know, but they're too afraid to ask. So when we hear about the cloud, we hear about like all the FBI iPhone cracking things, how much of that do we need to know, or how much do we need to know what's behind that?
Well, again, so it's a matter of, you talked about your stove and your microwave and things like that. The problem is your stove and your microwave, at least yet, aren't spying on you. It's getting to the point where with the Internet of Things is the buzzword we're putting the internet into everything. Your fridge is going to tell you when you're out of certain things, and those things will be on the internet, and that means they can be hacked. So, but it's not that you need to understand those things, but you do need to understand. It's like pulling back the curtain a little bit. I want to demystify these topics. It's not like, understanding the real nuts and bolts of what's going on is complicated. I'm not going to lie, but just knowing that data is about sending packets, and those packets, as they traverse the internet, are really most like postcards than letters. People kind of, think more, think this data is traveling kind of a letter format, but it's really postcards. Anybody along the way can see that data unless it's encrypted. It's these basic kind of understandings that I think that I'm trying to get out there so that people at least have a fundamental understanding of what technologies are doing behind the scenes and what it means to encrypt things and why that's important. Talking about privacy and what it really means when you're being tracked. I definitely feel that people, because they think it's some technology that is just beyond comprehension, that they just throw their hands up. They're like, you know what? I can't possibly understand this stuff. I'm going to leave it up to the corporations, the government. Hopefully they'll work it out. And I'm just going to go along and hope for the best. Unfortunately, the government and corporations don't always have your same interests at heart. So I try not to get political because we're so polarized in this country already. So I try not to dabble too much in that. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, you've got to realize that you need to understand for your own self what these things really are about and what you need to do to protect yourself, because if you don't, you're just going to get railroaded. And the decisions will be made for you, and that's not a good thing. So for me, it's about the cloud, the internet, encryption, privacy, tracking, all these sorts of topics that I try to cover in the book, where I want people to just get the very basic understanding of what these things are and why they're important, and why and just teach them enough that they can be an informed citizen and an informed buyer.
I think a lot of people, probably when they hear terms, that like you were talking about with encryption and tracking and all the stuff, they think, who, me? Why me? And one thing that I've discovered, especially over the last couple of years, is it's almost like, it's one, I think the parallel with the terms and everything, virus, and, with this is it almost is like virus. It almost is like illness, because it seems that people, care far less on spending money, time, effort on prevention of this stuff. But boy, when they get it, they sure spend a lot of money, time, and effort on the cure for this stuff. Right? Yeah. What will it take for people to start paying attention to the to the prevention part of it versus waiting to need a cure?
That is the $64 million question, because, as somebody who does know these things and understand how they work, I am constantly flabbergasted by how cavalier people are with their data, and their privacy and security, for that matter. I think the security part has a lot to do with the ignorance and not understanding the basics. And I'm trying to solve that, or help solve that. But for a lot of people, it takes something bad happening. And that's, at that point, it's honestly too late. So in my book and in my classes and things that I teach, I really try to focus on the preventative aspects. There's a lot of things we can all be doing. The digital age is still new, certainly in human history. So, we've all gotten used to things like locking our houses and cars when we leave them, installing smoke alarms and wearing seat belts and, not carrying too much money around. These are all things that over time we've all kind of learned that, these are basic common sense security things. But how'd they become common sense? There's no common sense yet really around cybersecurity and privacy. So, I'm trying to help develop that common sense. And, and one of the things I talk about a lot of times is that convenience is almost always at odds with security. Nobody likes to have to unlock their phone with a PIN all the time, or, nobody wants to lock down their computer with a password. It's like, you know what? I just want to open it and I just want it to work. But once you get burned, then you start thinking, yeah, that probably was a good idea. And so these are things that, once as a society, we start getting burned more and more by these things, it will start becoming common sense. So I'm trying to accelerate that process.
Well, that's the thing. Convenience, that's a huge, as soon as you said that, I realized that's where people pretty much, when it comes to prevention, it kind of matches up to how convenient it is, right? Mm-hmm. And, with the passwords that we choose, and, for a while there, I thought I should have named my kid password 123, and, people still do that, right? The convenience. And so rather than understand the security, it seems like a big industry around, let's make this convenient. You have these password storage applications. Mm-hmm. It seems like there's more and more applications or scripts or whatever you call them that are geared towards, well, let's make security convenient. But then, don't you know it, you install it and the craziness starts. Right? So how do we know what's a real solution versus what's the old gangster protection scheme, solutions?
Yes. So the age-old question, who do you trust? And that is a really hard question. So the approach I usually use is common to any TV cop drama, follow the money. What are the interests of the people selling you what they're selling you, or giving you what they're giving you? So while that may be, in some cases hard to figure out, you can kind of logically work through, does it make sense for Google to be offering me encryption? Yes, but you also have to realize that what they're doing is they're encrypting the traffic from your house or your mobile device to their servers. Beyond that, that's not encrypted. On their servers, it's not encrypted, because Google wants to see that data, because they make their living on advertising. So it's about realizing what the motivations are of the people that are selling it to you. And that's hard. And if you stop trusting anyone, you're basically talking about getting off the grid. So at some point, you've got to draw some lines, and it's about making some common sense choices. And even Apple's iMessage, its vaunted iMessage, it's encrypted. You can send it to multiple people encrypted. That's great. But there's nothing, because Apple takes care of the the inconvenient part, which is generating these security keys and actually doing the encryption, because they're handling that for you, there's nothing to say that they can't also send a carbon copy of all these transmissions to the NSA or to everybody asked for. So, you could quickly go down the rabbit hole and the paranoia can take over, and then you're looking at off the grid Ted Kaczynski living off in the forest somewhere. I'm not recommending that to anybody. What you're looking for is most hackers are really kind of like burglars, and they're looking for the people that are most vulnerable. In other words, you don't want to be you don't have to be the fastest antelope. You just don't want to be the slowest. So when it comes to mass surveillance, when it comes to hacking and things like that, most of these things are opportunistic. Once it comes to the point where the NSA or some hacker for whatever reason is specifically targeting you, it's a whole different ballgame. But most of these guys are just kind of looking in general for weak targets. And the NSA or corporations in general are kind of looking for these mass surveillance things. Your job is not to protect yourself from the NSA which is kind of the notion of the book. If you're trying to protect yourself with a dragon, forget it. Build up your defenses against common threats, fine. But if you try to, prevent yourself from being attacked by a dragon, you're going to go broke, and you can't do it. So my point of the book is there's so many simple things that everybody can do. I think the book has like 130 tips, and most of these things are free. Some aren't, but these are simple things that we could all be doing that just make it harder. And that's really what you're looking for in a lot of these cases. So who do you trust?
Well, I think what you said was that's what I love about the book and about your the education and the things that you share. It's not do everything, it's do something. Right. And I think everyone can do something. You talk about encryption. I'll say most advice that I see for free on the internet on how to protect yourself to me is encrypted, just so that it's right there on the screen because I can't figure it out what they're talking about. Right. But you do make that simple. So let's take advantage of that. And it's one of the reasons I consider you an influencer in this world. Who do you trust? So let me put that burden on your shoulders to help us out. Who should we trust when it comes to those simple things that we can do with what tools that we can use to protect us at some level so that we're not the slowest antelope? Yeah.
So encryption obviously is great. We've seen a lot of in the last, certainly since the Snowden era, his revelations come out. We've seen a lot of companies and products coming out that are very geared toward this sort of stuff. That's great. So it supports some of these people with your dollars. The ones that I personally would like to recommend or that I, in general, are the ones that are open source. As a software developer, I want to be able to look at the actual code and make sure that what these guys are doing is above board. And then you can, as regular people, you can't, you couldn't do anything with that, but you look for people to, Bruce Schneier, kind of a big hero of mine. It does some great work with cryptography. He has some great books that are very approachable for regular people. He's somebody I would trust. So you kind of find the people that you would trust to say, you know what, this is good, this is bad, or these products are worth looking into. There's Proton Mail that's come out recently. There's by some very respectable folks. If you want to do some encrypted email. Lots of I'd love to see the fact that there are so many products coming out today. And honestly, because Snowden did what he did. So like him or hate him, I think that he has kickstarted a revolution around these things where we realize that these tools are important. You asked me, who do we trust? How do you figure out what to do? I do my best in the book to recommend a few products that I think are worth having. But again, it all kind of comes down to wearing sunscreen, wearing a seatbelt, installing smoke alarms. There's some basic things we should all be doing that I try to lay out in the book, and I try to in my seminars. I try to talk about that are very easy. That at the end of the day, you have to trust somebody to some degree, but you want to. What you're really trying to do is you're trying to avoid mass tracking and mass surveillance. If they're targeting you specifically, they're going to find a way to do it. And that's the way it should be. Surveillance should be hard. Mass surveillance should be difficult. They shouldn't be able to easily watch everything that you do, either corporations or governments. So by adopting some of the things that I lay out in the book, you're making it more difficult. You're blending back into the background. And the other thing to note is that it's important that we all try to do these things so that the few of us who do it don't stick out. you know what I'm saying? It's like Tor. There's a network called Tor that is used to anonymize yourself on the internet. If the only people using that are drug dealers and hackers, then they're going to be targeted. But if we all use Tor, there's no way they could pick out the regular people from the people, the quote unquote bad people. Encryption is there for everybody, and we should all be using it. And the more we all use it, the more it kind of blends into the noise. The harder it is to say, because this person is using it, they must be doing something bad. So it's not just for the bad people. It's for everybody, and we should all be doing it.
Yeah, one of the things is, it's almost like there's people fall into one of two extremes. There's the people that are just the apathetic, don't know, don't think it's possible for them to understand this, and then there's the people that have fallen into the well of paranoia, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's almost impossible to be middle of the road on this stuff once you start reading about it and once you start learning about what's out there. It's almost impossible to just be kind of, it's interesting, but because once you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is what's possible. So, to avoid the paranoia, so I go and say, I want to use the convenience of a tool that stores my passwords, but holy smokes, that seems like a lot to hand over to the software that I install on my computer. Do you have a couple of tips for some of the basic programs that you feel are fairly safe and do provide at least a Band-Aid on that if someone wants to store their passwords?
Yes.
The basic antivirus that so many people, they claim they have it, but most people don't, right?
Yeah.
Are there a couple that you could suggest that people start with?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to password managers, I know that in particular, and I was one of them, think that, I'm putting all my passwords in one basket, all my eggs in one basket. My God, if somebody got into that, I'd be toast. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't use a password manager, what you're left with is you have to personally memorize multiple different passwords, and that's just not viable. There's the hackers know what people like to use for their passwords. They have them pre-calculated. So when they get a hold of when they download Target's password database or wherever the case may be, they get these things on their local computers, they can quickly hack about 50% of those passwords because most of them are well known. Because people choose horrible passwords if left to their own devices.
I know people that just say, I hope they don't find out my password because then they'll know my home address too.
Yeah. So as far as LastPass is the one that I use and the one I tend to recommend, but there are others. 1Password is fine. The real point is that it's so much better to use a password manager than to not, because what a password manager allows you to do is to have unique, long, random passwords for every website you have. And there's just no way the human brain is up to that task. So when you have if you use a common password or even a common set of passwords, what you're risking is that if they happen to crack into your, mom and pop Etsy account, which you don't think you care about, but you use the same password for your bank, now your bank account is open to hacking. So that's why you need unique passwords, and you should not know any of your passwords, at least your web passwords. You need to memorize a master password for your password manager, but for your online passwords, you shouldn't know any of them. They should be so long and complicated that you don't need them, or you can't possibly keep them in your head. That's what the password manager is for. And LastPass and 1Password and some of these ones that I've mentioned are very good about encrypting these things. They encrypt them before they ever leave your computer. So you don't have to worry about them being transmitted in the clear. These guys are very security oriented. Never say never. I cannot look you in the eye and tell you that these guys will never, ever be hacked and broken. But if you're doing the pros and cons, if you're weighing it out on a balance scale, it is so much more safe for you to go ahead and have a password manager so that all your accounts have long, crazy, unmemorable passwords. So password manager is a huge tip. That's something I recommend that everybody look into and do. LastPass is one that I particularly like. There are others. And then as far as, let's see, you mentioned something else.
Like virus software,
Yes.
Every time you buy something at the electronics store, they say they give you this free virus software,
Free.
And, so
sort of free. It's free for the first 6 months or whatever, and then they start charging and nagging you and whatever. There was a time, I think, when antivirus software made a lot of sense, but the hackers are moving so fast. All of these antivirus software packages depend on somebody finding the hack, finding the malware, and then spreading that news to everybody's antivirus software saying, hey, look out for this. Now, it's not always that way. There's some of these things are doing heuristic kind of things too, where they're saying, okay, that looks like bad behavior. Even though I don't know about this particular thing, this looks bad. I'm going to stop it. There is some of that going on, and that's helpful. But the hacking is moving so fast that the value of antivirus software has gone down, in my view. So what I would suggest in terms of that is don't pay for it. Don't go Norton or McAfee or whatever the case may be. They're annoying. They charge a lot of money. And at the end of the day, there are free versions that I think are good enough. Microsoft has Microsoft Security Essentials, which is free. I recommend that for Windows users. I think it's called Microsoft Defender in Windows 10. And for Apple, there's a couple there's Sophos, Home, Sophos, Home. It's pretty good. And Avira, I'm not sure how they pronounce it. Also free and good product for the Mac. Actually, Avira is both Mac and PC. So it's free, and there's no reason not to try that if it's free. But I wouldn't personally pay for them at this point. It's kind of we're kind of beyond the point where they're supremely effective. So I wouldn't pay money.
Yeah, to me, it's like some of them. It's almost like what's more effective, your home alarm or that sign that sits in your yard, right?
Yeah.
And so, something I guess is have something to try, because I know they'll work on it on occasion. Certainly, yes. I'd like to ask you two more things if we can cover. Mm-hmm. One is phones, right? Because now it's phone is the computer that is permanently attached to us.
Yes.
I guess, and a lot of people still don't think of it as that way, or they don't think about their phones being, with viruses. But now, with it's connected to the cloud, and I think most people don't even know what that means. But what do we need to worry about as far as our phones?
Well, there's a couple angles there. First of all, there's, the market is pretty well dominated by either Apple, which is iOS, or Android, which is many, many providers. I will admit it. I will attest. I'm a Mac fanboy. So, take that into account as you listen to my recommendations. Apple has done a really good job, I think, with this. They are really very security and privacy focused. The downside, of course, is that Apple's a lot more restrictive. And a lot of people that have gone to Android, bristle with that. And that's one of the reasons they've gone to Android is because, darn it, they want to be able to put whatever they want on there. And if they want to hack it, they want to hack it and jailbreak their phone and do all sorts of things. I'm here to tell you that, yes, that gives you a lot more freedom, but it also opens you to a lot more security risks. So the first thing I would tell everybody is make sure you put a PIN on your phone and there's got to be some way that to unlock your phone, lock it up. If you've got a fingerprint reader, I think that's fine. I think that's a good trade-off between security and convenience. It's not perfect, but it will. If a lot of people just say, you know what, that's too much of a pain in the butt, I'm not going to do the PIN. The fingerprint makes that go away. I think for a lot of people, that's good enough. So I would lock your phone with a fingerprint. So that's the first thing I recommend. Android, unfortunately, because of the way the market has developed, it's hard to get software updates for a lot of Android phones. I think I read somewhere that only 29% of Android phones currently out there can qualify for getting software updates. And because this is such a cat and mouse game between the hackers and the software developers, you really want to be able to get updates whenever you want to get them. And that's one place where Apple does shine. You can always get the latest update from Apple. They're always free. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. Whereas a lot of the phone makers, Android kind of came second to the market, kind of pushed back and said, no, we want to be able to put custom loads in this. We want to brand it. We want to tweak it. We want to do our own thing. And unfortunately, what that meant in a lot of cases was it fractured the market, and you're now gatekeeper for getting updates is your provider. So if they don't want to, or if they don't have time to get the latest and greatest software with all the security fixes from Google, then you're behind the eight ball. So for that reason alone, if we're strictly talking about security, I would have to put the iPhone ahead of Android. Now, they may fix that, of course, but just the way the market has developed, it's really kind of put Android behind the eight ball.
Well, one more thing that I want to talk about, the old saying that, if you, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. We're living in a time where we have no history for this. We're living in a time when where there is no point of reference for what I want you to hit on now, and that is we are putting phones in the hands of our kids, teens, preteens, even not because here, look at this, handheld babysitter, which a lot of people do, but it's here, it's just in case, it's for safety. So I can always, be able to contact you or if you need something. But there really seems to be an awful lot of risk associated with that. Not even external risk, but even risk for what the kids might do with that they don't realize the consequences that are involved in that. Do you have any tips or suggestions for parents that do have phones in the hands of their kids for both protecting them from outside forces, but also for protecting them from themselves with those phones?
Yeah, fantastic question. And this is probably one of the questions I get most often. It's funny. People, tend to be less concerned about themselves, but as soon as you bring their kids up, they're extremely concerned. So they might give away their own privacy and sacrifice their own security. But when it comes to their children, it's a whole different ballgame, which, maybe rightly so. And I've got two girls. I've got a 14 and a 16-year-old daughters, and we've gone through this. So I'm right there in the middle of this, and I understand. Again, this is kind of a convenience versus security trade-off. If you want to be secure, don't give your kids a smartphone. But in today's world, that's not really tenable. So, what do you do? Again, same things apply to the kids as apply to the parents. Make sure they've got a PIN on that phone. The other thing is education. You need to learn these things yourself and understand how things work so that you can impress upon your kids what's important when it comes to privacy and security on their phones. One of the things I'd make sure I tell my kids and anybody who will listen is the internet is forever. I don't care what the app says in terms of no one else can see this or it will disappear when you're done looking at it. Don't believe it. And if you put anything on the internet, expect that it will live forever. And by that, I mean, you could be applying for a job in 5 years or 10 years. At my company, I do this regularly. When I interview prospective employees, the first thing I do is go to their Facebook page and see what kind of things they're posting. And a lot of them, unfortunately, are not thinking about what they're sharing. It's just a fact of life today. And so you've got to impress upon them that anything that you send out could live forever and could be seen by anybody, regardless of the claims of whatever application you're running or what your friends tell you. Just assume. What I like to say is you should use the grandmother rule, and that is you should not do anything on your phone that you would not proudly show to your grandmother. I don't know what it is about grandmothers that make them the end all be all, but they are. You just know it. If you wouldn't feel comfortable doing this in front of your grandmother, you shouldn't be doing it. Golden rule applies as well. Make sure, don't do anything to somebody else that you would want them to do to you. Do those things. If you've got to be mean, well, you shouldn't be mean. I don't even go there. I'm not going to, but it's, so keep those kind of rules in mind. Make sure that you understand that anything you do there could live on and come back to haunt you at some future time. For me, it's more about education. You're not really going to deny them these things. I would recommend that parents make sure that they have their kids' passwords to any accounts that they have, and use that judiciously. It's not something you should be checking in all the time, but if you need to know, and the kids need to know that if push comes to shove and they are worried about your safety for some reason, that they should have access to that. Your parents should be friending their kids on whatever, social media they are. I know that's not fun. I know that, but you should, and you don't trust what you hear from other people. You need to kind of do the research yourself a little bit, do some Googling and find out, what the privacy situations are for some of these apps. And just make sure you're aware. Some of these things are better than others. So for me, it's mostly about education. You can't really deny kids today access to these devices, and they're wonderful, wonderful devices. You've got the entire human history of knowledge at your fingertips in your pocket. That's an amazing thing. And I don't think kids should take that for granted, and they should understand what that really means. When we were kids, we certainly didn't have that. It's an amazing thing. So, but you just have to temper that with the knowledge that there are downsides. One of the other things I tell kids is, you should never friend anybody, whatever your social account may be, unless you've met that person in person. There's too many ways for somebody to pretend to be somebody else, and they may sound legitimate, but until you've met that person in person, you don't know. So that's kind of a general rule of thumb I give out.
Well, I got to say, Carey Parker, this is just incredibly important information, and the way that you share it, it just makes it easy to understand. But also, you also have a great way of pressing the importance of it, and how it just really is a required part of living in the society that we live in. And unfortunately, we've only gotten to just scratch the surface. You talked a little about social media, but I swimming through my head, Wi-Fi, MiFi, your Fi, the banking and credit cards, and just so much stuff that we do that we probably don't realize how many hours of the day we spend connected out there. And I think it's something that I think a lot of people are realizing. They can't take it for granted. They don't have to be someone of importance or consequence to have somebody tap into their stuff and really make a mess of it. And also, you do a great job, when people get into panic mode. That's what usually when, we talk about cures, people, it happened. I didn't think it would happen, but it happened. What do I do now? And you really do have a tremendous, just a wealth of resource and knowledge. And I got to say, you must be a pretty patient guy for a guy that's in IT, because I think that's the one thing that most IT folks I've ever met lack, is that patience gene. So I truly do think think of you as an influencer in this world, and I'm certainly grateful that you came on the show today. How can people find out more about Carey Parker, follow what you're doing, and find out about the book? Get a copy of the book, the Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. I love that title.
Thank you. So you can go to my website, firewallsdon'tstopdragon.com. There are links there to find the book. Of course, you could just search Amazon for it. You can find it there. I've also got a newsletter that I put out every week. I just started that last month, where every week I try to send out a timely security or privacy tip. So you can sign up for that on my website. Also on my website, I've got some resources that I try to keep up to date with other things that I recommend: books, podcasts, websites, movies, documentaries. Again, my focus is really trying to reach regular people with stuff that's actually interesting. I'm not going to try to suggest something to you that it's going to be boring and put you to sleep, because it's important that these things be engaging. So I try to be that myself, and I try to recommend other resources to people that are equally as accessible and entertaining and fun to read, but very informative. So you can find some of the information there. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter if you'd like, at Wawasee Media. Wawasee is a lake that I grew up on as a child. And I think those are probably the main ways that you should keep in touch.
Well, I'll tell you, you have an incredibly easy way for people to become fans of yours, because of the things that you share. And I think there's a lot of people that resonate. We kind of talked today just about the higher layer of problems and the solutions that are out there, but you actually dig in deep into a lot of things that I think a lot of people will resonate with and can truly appreciate the honesty that you put out there without tarting it up that you see in a lot of the media. So I certainly appreciate that. And we'll put the links out there on this show post for Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. Once again, thanks so much for being on the show today. Is incredible information, and we could have done it for 12 hours and still not got through a fraction of it. So I appreciate it, and I think everyone that listens to this, definitely check out Carey's website. Again, Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. Check out the book, especially if you have questions that you are afraid to ask. If you are the person that you avoid the IT guy at your work at all cost, you're going to get real answers to your questions, And again, it's not in a way that it's not condescending. It's entertaining, and I think it's one of the most beneficial ways to learn about something that we just can't ignore anymore. So, with that, until next time on Influencers Radio, remember, you are the only real game changer.
You've been listening to Influencers Radio. To get all past shows and updates on future shows, visit influencersradio.com today or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/influencersradio.